Welcome to Start Lines and Swag Bags, presented by the Flying Pig Project. The use of this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as running or health advice. This podcast is not intended to replace any professional medical advice. Thank you for your support.
Welcome to this Sunday's episode of Start Lines and Swag Bags, and there's two things you need to know before we jump into this episode. One, after I sent my guest the intro, I took 20 minutes trying to find my phone. And for those of you who know, when you record a podcast, quite often you're using your phone. And my phone was on my computer the whole time I was looking for it. So that's how this is going to start today. Also, I am recording this episode without being able to see myself at all because of a new computer setup. So editing ought to be fun. Okay, so all of you know that have been listening that tonight is a very big reveal because in the bracket, I am at the F3 USole impasse. I have to pick one of those two to go ahead to Pettit, against Pettit. Well, guess what? I'm not going to choose tonight again. I'm going to make y'all wait because we've been talking so much about races over the past 10 weeks. I thought it would be fun to do like a behind the scenes. So with that being said, I called on a friend who happens to be a race director, and we're going to hear from him tonight. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So tell us about yourself, whatever you'd like to share.
Okay, well, Jonathan Keynes. So I have been directing races since 2009 is when I started doing our first one. And at different points in time, I was directing up to 5 different races within a calendar year, putting all of them on. And right now, I don't do that full time anymore. Now I work for a nonprofit, but still kind of do the same thing because what I do now is I organize a week-long bike ride for the nonprofit. It's a week-long bike ride. It's a fundraiser. It's an outreach event. So I get to travel all over the place and put that on and actually try to figure out where we're going to be stopping for aid stations and different things like that over the course of 5 days and 400 plus miles for our Tour de Trees bike ride that we do. So it's all of the race directing history that I had works very nice with my current position over at Tree Fund now.
That's interesting. I would not have put that together, but you're 100% correct. It's a larger scale.
It's a different kind of scale because yes. It's almost like putting together a bunch of races at once because it's over the course of a week is this bike ride and there'll be different outreach events or there'll be different aid stations and people will be arriving at different times, whereas for a race everybody in theory gets there before the race starts and finishes and goes home after the race ends. Which except for like if you're putting on some kind of expo or packet pickup or something, everything's basically contained within that couple hour block during the race. Whereas for the bike ride, I need to make sure that some people that are in the back are nice and still safe, and the people that are in the front are getting fed, and then they're coming in at different times and all that. So it's all just organization and timing and figuring out where everybody is and making sure they're all in the right spot and not off course.
Okay, so as soon as you brought up organization and timing, I now know why that was never a career for me. Okay, so but really 5 different races at once?
I think the most I put on in 1 year was 5 different events. Yeah.
What 2 races are you, at this point, best known for as race director?
Well, so the only 2 races that we have left that I'm still in charge of, which are both independently owned of each other, just it's not worth at the moment getting into the how everything's separated and split off and whatever. But I am the race director for the Wisconsin Marathon, Half Marathon, and 5K, which is in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in May. And then I'm also the race director for the Evanston Flying Turkey 5K, which is a Thanksgiving Day morning race in Evanston, Illinois.
I started to think, like, what do I want to ask? But so many questions became very race specific, so I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do this. But I am going to say it's come up many times when people are describing races, small races, bigger races. What does exactly go behind the scenes? Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand what does happen behind the scenes. You're a runner. You show up, you get a bib, you run, you eat a banana, you go home. And that's it. But it was, me volunteering last May in Wisconsin with you guys that was my first ever, like, start to finish, get to see what happens fully behind a race. And the only thing I remember a lot, but the one thing I remember is all weekend, y'all kept saying, wow, it's going so smoothly this year. And I was, first of all, I take full credit for that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Full credit. Second, it then scares me for what it could look like this coming May when I do it again. But if people were to say to you, like, what are 3 things that you really wish runners would either know or acknowledge about, setting up a race, what would they be?
Ooh, well, there's a couple of things, and I'll preface this by saying I think a lot of race directors, especially if they're like professional or they do it for a living, or they're not just doing it for their their churches or their schools group or something. I will say that a lot of the time the thought process is, if you don't see how the sausage is being made, that's very important for the runners. Like, the runners don't need to know if there's problems or if there's anything going on. At the same time, though, I will say I have run into several people over the course of the years and years of doing this that I would really like to show how it's made. Because there are some people that you ever run into those people who just really think they know better than everybody else, but they don't know anything. It's I will say, usually it's with the best of intentions. I will say that it's always with the best of intentions. My current my current CEO, where I'm at right now, has coined the term, what is it? Oh my goodness, I had it and I lost it. Caring loudly. Like, when people have ideas, or they want to change stuff up, or they suggest something that really doesn't make any logical sense, and they get really passionate about it. They're not complaining or butting in. They're caring loudly.
No, I don't know anyone that does that ever. Okay. So
back to your question. Yes, I never really answered the question. So, okay. I will say probably some of the things that I wish people would know is, and this is especially true for people that have, like, volunteered at the, like, Chicago Marathon or some really big race. Volunteers are the hardest thing to get. Everyone looks, oh, look at all those people that the Chicago Marathon gets at their aid stations, and they're, everyone's begging to get in, and this and this. That does not happen at smaller races. Smaller races don't have the really nice Nike jackets to give to people, and the overall panache of saying that you were able to go and do it. So I will say that volunteers are always the toughest thing to get. If you are listening to this, I highly suggest at some point in time you volunteer at a race. Just, if your local one, just say, hey, I want to do it, help out, be a course marshal. Course marshals are always some of the toughest things to get. Be someone at the gear check, see how that controlled chaos kind of works. So that is my advice to people. Other things that I wish people would know. The best way to say this is, if you have some kind of special request, you're not the only person that has had a special request. And the more of those that you send in, the harder it is to get prepared for race day for that race director, especially if there's someone who is a volunteer. I am talking about like the smallest races. People have a full-time job and then they have kids and then they got to take them over, but they happen to be in charge of this 150 person race that their church puts on, and they got the job because they were the only person that's ever run a 5K before. And somebody said, we do this every year, we're putting it on you. The more things that race director has to take on, the harder it is by race day to do things. So always be patient, and understand that people do their best with that.
Give me an example of a special request.
Oh goodness. I mean, even a really simple special request, and I get this one all the time, and we can sometimes handle it, sometimes we can't. It sounds like it's a super easy thing to handle, but it's not always. You get the request, I am doing 50 states. This will be my 42nd marathon. Can you give me bib number 42? Sounds like a really super easy request. Sometimes it's easy to handle. Sometimes our bibs are not laid out like that. Like for ours specifically, our bibs are done like 1 through 3,000 are for the marathon, 3,000 through 10,000 are for the half or whatever. So it doesn't always match up that way. But at the same time, you have to be able to relay that to whatever volunteer is sitting there, that, hey, we put this bib off to the side for this specific person. And like when we do it, we do the auto-assigned bibs, which is, by the way, the greatest thing that was ever invented, is the auto-assigned bib system for race day check-in, where people just come up, they give their name, the volunteer takes the top bib off the pile, and they just assign it. That it fixes so many problems. But at the same time, you can't just say this specific bib is for this specific person when they come in. We don't know when they're going to be here. They may not even walk up to you. And sometimes, when you have volunteers, some of them just show up on race day. You can't always give them information about exactly how to do things and what the process is. It's basically this is the site to check them in. This is how you do this and this and this. Go.
What's the most, I don't know if you can give me the most, but what's like the most annoying request you've ever, and when I mean annoying, I mean like, hold on, when I mean annoying, because we have to measure annoying.
Yeah, right.
Annoying, but because it just lacked common sense. Like,
there's been so many, crazy requests, and listen, I can tell already that through this, and I come off this way sometimes. I do sometimes sound a little bit cynical as a race director, as a race promoter. That is, I think it is the personality of many race directors where they have to bury that back deep in their brain, where they just put it off and say, this is the way it goes. People are like that sometimes. It's the little stupid crazy things that happen that you have to be able to wash it off. And when I get some of those like really ridiculous, questions, you laugh at it for a second, or you yell at your screen sometimes. That will definitely happen when you see those emails. And then you put it away and you forget about it.
I think what's funny is that the word is not cynical. Exactly.
Okay.
It's more, you've drawn the line, you've made the border, not border, boundary. You've set the boundary, and that's the end of it. And as someone who has crossed the boundary when it comes to race entries for Wisconsin and deferring and other things, I mean, every single time I do, you literally, like, it doesn't matter that you knew me. It was like you quoted right off the website to me, and I was like, Okay, because that's a boundary. I mean, that's, it's literally, you have to set it for everyone across the
Well,
board.
and that's exactly the point is, and you get this a lot, no matter what kind of race you're putting on, you will get this a lot, is somebody asks you to make an exception. And if you make an exception for that person, not only do you have to figure out, do I have to make an exception for the next person, but you have to figure out, like, why am I doing it? What is the benefit of doing it? Like I said, you have to kind of roll it off. And I don't even remember what the question was at this point. What were we talking about?
Okay. No, I was talking about the fact that we talk about boundaries and we talk about expectations.
Right.
And, I think part of the trick for me is I know you, I know Joel, I know Zach, you start to know race directors or other people who have different roles in the races. And without thinking about it, you cross that line. You don't mean to.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't, it's not an intentionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe you're calling it a favor. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
something like that. Yeah.
it has to, there should be no one who takes offense to somebody who has that boundary.
Right. And you get sometimes you put that out there, like, I can't do this for this reason or something like that. But then, they will reply and they'll say, well, that's not fair.
Right.
But then your thought as a race director is, well, how is that fair to the person who asked that same question 3 weeks ago? That why can I make an exception for you? I can't make an exception for you. Listen, there's a lot of things I will say that are not necessarily great about the race directing industry. Like, there's a lot of things where, especially with, deferrals and refunds and stuff like that. Like, it's a tough thing to go over. And yet, people don't necessarily understand that, like, there are overhead costs, there are, straight up, things, with orders and things like that. That is not what I'm talking about right now. There are, rules in place that, you try to abide by, the best you can. It's a tough thing to make an exception to that rule because you're trying to be fair to everybody. And then, if one person thinks that you're not being fair to them, well, you're not the first person to have said that before. Which is the tough thing. That's the thing that keeps race directors, like, up at night. It's like, I don't want to make this person mad. But it's part of the thing. I have come up with a thing, recently, especially for smaller races. It's like, look at buying a race entry as going to a Cubs game. If you and a lot of races since COVID, a lot of races have been a lot better with either deferring or with stuff like that. There have been things put in places a lot more. But at the same time, if you got tickets to a Cubs game and you can't go for some reason, you can sell those to somebody else. So you can, transfer it. Maybe in some race, a lot of races let you do that. That's one thing that you can do. But you can't, the day of, say, it's not as nice out as I thought it was going to be, I'm not going to go. And then the next day, call the Ricketts family and say, hey, can you give me my $45 back for the Cubs tickets that I bought because I didn't show up? And they make a lot more money than that little local race does. The amount of money that people think that races make and what they actually make is a lot different.
Hold on. Do you mean that somebody has actually called after the race that they weren't able to do it and they want their money back?
Oh yeah, I had that happen to me last week.
That's the dumbest thing. That's what right. Well, that's why I said what's the stupidest. Okay, I wasn't going to say stupid.
But you say that. But you say that you have worked at races before. You know people that have put on events. You're not. I mean, not everyone who goes to races is a hardcore runner. They go out, every day or whatever, and they get their miles in. Some people that show up to that are, this is the only time of year that I've run. My girlfriend talked me into coming. I'm just going to finish this and take my t-shirt and go home. when race directors communicate things to everything, they have to realize that not everyone they're talking to understands how races operate. They don't understand, what a check-in process is. They don't understand that they have to wear a bib. They don't understand what the timing rules are. You have to, if we as a running culture are going to be inclusive of everyone that wants to participate in these kind of runs, you have to be able to talk to every single kind of person and be able to explain to them why different things are done in specific ways. Sometimes it's for safety, sometimes it's for either financial reasons, sometimes it's just because that's the way races operate. But you have to understand that not everybody that's going to show up to a specific event has race experience. Everybody's done a race for the first time sometime.
I think, first of all, that all of that makes so much sense. And it's very interesting, I think, coming off of like the biggest holiday when it comes to the family run, the family turkey trot, oh my God, I got involved in the family turkey trot family. Because I think that's an excellent example. When you were just talking about what you were talking about, that's who I thought of. I thought of the family who buys, 8 bibs because they think, the daughters are bringing home the boyfriends and grandma's going to make it and all of that. And then only 4 of them can ultimately do it and that they want a refund for the 4 people.
Right. Yep.
That's exactly what I thought of. Because as runners, normally we register for a race. And if you can't do it, you're hurt. You can't make it. The weather's not good or whatever. That's on you. I mean, that's the chance you take.
You say that, that, but other people don't know that. People they do not assume, and they don't want to assume the risk. And I'm sure you and I have both been in a situation at some point in time where we didn't want to assume that risk, or we didn't think that risk should be on us. All of a sudden, let's give another example. Let's say you have a 1,000 person 5K or something, and you've sold out. Let's even say you've sold out. It's great. Let's say that race day, all of a sudden, it's going to be really, really rainy. No thunderstorms, but it's just torrential. It's going to be a torrential downpour, and nobody wants to do it. You have bought all the medals. You have paid for, you have budgeted everything. People say, well, I'm not going to show up. Can you refund me? It's like, no, that's the risk you take. We're still having this. The risk is still on you. Or even with training. Like, let's say that there was a mass accident, the week beforehand, and everybody that was involved was 100 people, and everybody broke their leg. It could happen. I'll give you an example later, but it could happen. That's the risk that you take. Now, some of the risk is on the race. The risk on the race is that people won't necessarily sign up, because there are still those upfront costs where no matter what, I have to have this number of police, out there. The permit cost this much. I still have to have the tent out there regardless of, how much it costs. So the big top costs, this much. The ambulance costs this much. So there's still that risk. But I'll even give you another example. I had an example where we were having the Wisconsin Marathon. It was a beautiful day. And all of a sudden I start getting messages on my phone, through Facebook, through email, which I try to check that morning. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, because I'm running around and doing 100 things, but I try. That's the best you can do, is you can try to reply to people. We're in Kenosha, Wisconsin. It's just over the Illinois border. If you are familiar with the Illinois area, you know where 290 and 94 split off, where 94 keeps going north and 294 goes a little bit northwest. There was an accident on the off-ramp that morning. Whole bunch of Chicagoland racers right at that time, and it was shut down. Like, they shut down the ramp for 2 hours. So people were emailing me, checking, can I still come? Am I going to be able to make it? What can we do? We were able to delay the race for 20 minutes, but the cops have timelines. The volunteers have timelines. Like, everything is on that timeline. You can delay a little bit, there are some things you can't just delay for long. And we were able to work with some of them that showed up later. They started off a little bit later, whatever. But I remember, a couple days later, putting something up on Facebook. Hey, thanks for everyone for coming. Somebody had mentioned something like, what are you going to do for the folks that were impacted by the accident? And I had said originally, like, we'll see what we could do for you. It's a crappy situation. We might be able to help you out. We'll check you later. And somebody commented below that comment who hadn't even done the race, like was not affiliated with the race at all, that had said, oh, they should have delayed it. They should have delayed the whole race because people couldn't come. I'm like, so you would like us to delay the race for an indeterminate amount of time for an indeterminate amount of people that we don't know when they're going to get there. It's like, you can do so many things, and again, this person had not signed up for the race, and they were just commenting on somebody else's comment that they happened to see it was a friend of theirs. It's like, tell me you don't understand how this works without telling me you don't understand how this works.
Exactly. The hope there is that was somebody who legitimately just didn't understand,
right,
how a road race operates.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to throw that in because, other races could be handled a little differently, but a road race, no, you have to reopen the road at some point. This is not something you have control over.
Yep. Eventually people want to be able to leave their houses. I mean, you laugh, but it's a big deal. And actually we redid the Wisconsin Marathon course this year, just slightly, specifically because we're always trying to figure out what are the best ways for traffic flows for residents to get out of there, because it is an inconvenience, for the people who live there. Runners always have a tendency to think, yeah, right, race is coming to my town. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to see friends along the route and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but the person who's got to work that morning, or the person who, doesn't appreciate having, races go on in their area and having their streets closed off for, 2 to 6 hours, depending on the distance of the race. I've had people say, I had a race before that said, it'd be greater if you could move this race to this different area. I said, well, the area we have it on, there's like 3 houses, and the area you want me to move it to has like 100 houses. So you want me to close off the streets of those residents for 2 hours for this 5K?
It's funny. See, you're making me think of things I don't normally think of, and I'll tell you why. I have a specific example for this one. This past year, now the Schaumburg Park District try that happens. You did, right? Well, I don't remember this from a prior year, but this past year, all of a sudden I go out and my street is all marked up with arrows, and I'm like, no, they don't come down my road. No, they because for like half a second, even as someone who would be in a race, I was like, no, that'll mess up my morning. So even I gave no grace to the sport that I love. So, because in that moment, all I could think of was, well, that's an inconvenience. And as I say it out loud, but as I say it out loud, it was like 7:30 on a Sunday morning. Where am I going?
Yeah, you're probably going out and running anyway, so it doesn't matter.
No, it's not like it. All right. You do the Wisconsin Marathon in May,
mm-hmm.
and you do the Flying Turkey in Evanston for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting thing that I found about when I volunteered in Wisconsin was I think the first time I saw you on the race day was 2:00 in the afternoon.
Probably, yeah.
Because from the second you got up, and I was of course in the finish line area, the start line pack and pickup. I was in race village, I guess you would call it, like the whole time. And for the Evanston Flying Turkey, you run the race.
Yeah.
In a turkey costume.
Which also means that there's a period of time where I'm not accessible. Where with Wisconsin, I'm almost always accessible because I'm driving the truck, I'm setting stuff up. Like my job on race day is to set different things up. I just because of the way our course is, I'm not always able to get back to where I need to, to the start line or anything. And if I need to be cleaning stuff, like that's the way it works. But with Flying Turkey, half an hour-ish before the race starts, I have to start putting my turkey costume on because it takes a little while. And I have to warm up a little bit. I gotta warm up because I've been up for a couple hours at that point. Like I've been doing stuff. I gotta move the body a little bit. And I won't lie, I have to take some pictures with people because I get stopped all over the place to say, "Oh my God, there's the turkey," and they take photos with me, and I'm always more than happy to do that. So I do that, and then after the race, I grab a quick chug of water. After I finish, and I go right back out on the course with the suit on and cheer people on and do all that, and then take more pictures. And then by 10 o'clock, I have to be back to the announcer tent so that I can start doing awards and stuff and, do anything else. So, I have told people in the past, if they are really considering being the race director for an event, I tell them, number one, don't put everything on yourself. You think that I'll do this, then I'll do this, then I'll do this. No, 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 no. It never works out that way. Delegate as much stuff as you possibly can and be very clear in your instructions, because if you have 5 things that you have to do that morning, you'll be lucky if you get done with 3.
So I know that obviously the two experiences are different, both from a race director standpoint and other standpoints. Do you like one better than the other?
No, they're both they're different monsters. And especially with the race distance, it's a different kind of people that show up too. If you're coming in, you're doing the marathon, you have put in so many weeks of training, for this. It's a big deal. Even if you're doing the half, or if you're doing the 5K, over there, like it's the kind of just kind of feel of the race is more serious. Even though we're not really the most serious crew in the world, we're not trying to be like we're not getting on the map of the world marathon majors or anything. We are what we are. We try to be fun with it and try to put on a good event, that highlights the city and brings people in and to enjoy a race, along the lakefront and everything. So that's got a different feel to it. That I have to do a lot more work for that one. There's a lot more planning on everything. Whereas Flying Turkey, there's more people for it. It's a lot more chaos just because there's a lot more people there that, as I was explaining before, they don't typically go out to races. Like this might be the one thing that they do every year, and it's all their families that come out. And, there's a little bit more explaining that goes on, with writing and trying to, herd the cats basically, to get them to where they need to go and things like that. So they're totally, different, kind of events. So I can't say I prefer one over the other. It's comparing an apple to a really, really different apple.
I know. So, and I'll admit, like the way you answered it, I think I wish I had phrased it differently, because I don't think I meant like which one do you. I'll have to go back and see how I said it. I may have to like dub something over, because I don't think it was like which one do you like better. I don't know, because even listening to that, they are so different. Because at the marathon, so that was the first time that I ever, like, for any reason, stayed at the finish line of a marathon to watch people finish. And whether it was the 5K, the half, or the full, some of the stories of the people who crossed the finish line and then would see the first volunteer, and they're sharing their story with you. It's so much different than a big 5K. I mean, you can't even compare the two. Some of the people who broke a personal record or did their first marathon or did their first half marathon, it really is not. You're right. You can't compare the two. There is no comparing.
And to go a little bit farther, the Wisconsin Marathon was the first event that I was ever in charge of. That was the first one that we ever created when we said that we started, when we decided that we wanted to start putting on races. Like that was the first one. And I joke with people, like, if we didn't do a marathon first, we probably never would have done any kind of other races, because we definitely dove right into it and put on the absolute hardest race you could possibly put on.
And you've worked with Tracy like the whole time on these.
Yeah.
It's always been the two of you with both races?
No. So how it came about was, everybody that I have worked with that had owned any of the races worked at Chicago Athlete Magazine. For those who may not know Chicago Athlete Magazine, it was a magazine around, since the 80s. It was around for 30 something years. It still exists on a website with a different owner and everything, and she's wonderful. And I tried to help her out with some stuff too. But Chicago Athlete Magazine used to put on the Chicago Bike Show for several years, which was at Navy Pier for a while. It was at Rosemont for a while, but we decided we wanted to stop doing that, and move on to putting on races, because there was definitely a hole to fill. Specifically in the spring, there wasn't really a Chicagoland marathon race, that was close. There were a couple, but there wasn't, one that people really knew. So we're like, we can put one on in Wisconsin. We had a very good relationship with the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Wisconsin. We presented the idea to them. It's not Wisconsin, the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Kenosha. We presented the idea to them. Went back and forth a little bit with, how we can do it and what this and this and this. And actually, that was how the name came about, because we originally wanted to call it the World's Cheesiest Marathon, and that was going to be the name of it. And the folks up there said, yeah, we don't really like that idea. So we ended up coming up with Wisconsin Marathon, because it didn't exist yet. So we said, Wisconsin Marathon's great. So that's how that, came about. And then the next race we did was 2 years later, was the Evanston Flying Turkey 5K. And then we put on other races. Another big race that we had, it wasn't even a race. It was the 20 miler. It was a 20-mile training run in Bussy Woods. We did that for 7 years or so. So it was similar to the one Kara does. It just happened to be on Saturday. Kara's was always on Sunday. So we did the Saturday one in the suburbs. They did the Sunday one in the city. So it was that option. And we even worked with them a little bit to help, cross promote a little bit, because we knew not everybody can make one or the other. So, we kind of helped out with that. We did the trick or treat trot in Evanston for a couple of years. That was a 6K. That was kind of a fun event. It was a Halloween themed event. It was a 6K because I couldn't figure out, there was a lot of construction going around. I couldn't figure out how to get a 5K course that made sense. So we said, well, it's Halloween. We'll do a 6K because it's a little bit scarier. And that's how it became a 6K. So that's how that was. We also did the Undie Dash for 3 years. That was a great race that just did not make any money. that I wish one day we could bring that one back. And then I think there was one more race that we did. What was we did the Fall Hall in Mount Prospect one year. That one was just an utter disaster from start to finish, except for the fact that everybody loved the course.
I feel like I've heard about the Undie race.
Undie Dash was great.
I don't. Where was that?
It was in the city. The first year it was at Soldier Field, and then the second year it was I forget what the name of the park is, but it's the park right by the curve on the on LSD, by the yacht club. So the second year with that one, we actually had our post race party on the yacht club.
Oh.
So on the big boat right there, and we got it because you had to be a member to do something there, and we happened to knew someone that was a member, and they helped us out. And everyone's like, okay, we're gonna go to the party on the boat, and everybody starts walking over there, and the security guard looks at us. He said, we have a dress code. And we said, Undie Dash. So that was a fun night, and we were not invited to the boat the next year.
Can I assume that was a summer race?
That was in August, yeah. It was a Thursday night in the city in August, yeah.
So here's the thing, and you don't have to answer this. So I do have to choose between the F3 half and 5K,
uh-huh.
and the USole December Trail Challenge. in
Ooh.
my race bracket to become the other finalist to take all the recognition of my favorite race. And when I made the bracket, I had no idea that those two would end up going against one another.
I say that's a really hard call because they're two very different events. One is it's F3 half marathon is a hardcore event in January. Like, you are the hardiest of the hardy if you are doing that race, in January. It is a wonderful, really well-run event. It's great hanging out in the United Club. I love getting the whatever kind of swag they do every year. Although I will say, Zach, if you're listening, I like the old logo better for the sweatshirts. I personally really love that event because I love having to do a half marathon in January. I think it's great. And then at the same time, I do USole like every year. It's a great course. It's a fun vibe. I was even talking with Joel, the guy from USole, the other day as I was at the race. He's like, man, everyone, when they come out to these trail races, everyone's just so happy and excited to be out here. And, everyone's just friendly to each other and they're all just talking and hanging out and whatever. And on top of that, the Universal Soul Race has chili. It's really hard. It's really hard.
It's an awful predicament to put myself in. And
I can't not vote for F3 because they do our timing and I need him to keep his prices cheap.
I know there's right between Zach and Joel. I mean, I don't even know. Like, it's a bad it's one of those, if you know, that's a bad matchup.
It's a tough matchup. It's not a bad matchup. It's a tough matchup. It's a very hard decision.
It is. It's probably the hardest decision. The harder decision before that, and you may not know, that's okay. It was the headbanger half versus the Desplaines dash. Or
never done headbanger, so
okay, I know. But do you remember the dash Desplaines picture that got posted? That we were called elite.
Oh yes, that was great. We had such a good time that day.
That's the reason that one actually moved ahead, but ultimately the Pettit Marathon and Marathon took it out.
Oh, well, I can see that. Yeah. There's a lot of Chicago suburbs has a lot of cookie cutter races, which are great. Nothing wrong with the cookie cutter race, but when they're all kind of each one fast, flat course, technical shirt, bagels at the end, post race party at the bar down the street. Every single one, every town's got the same one.
And interestingly that you put that way, because whether it's F3 or USole going up against Pettit, none of those races would be in that category.
None of them. That's right.
Those are all very specialty races. Thank you so much for coming on. I really think there's going to be additional race director episodes.
I will happily spill the tea for any time.
Well, because you know what though, but here's the thing: it's not spilling the tea necessarily. I think some of the things you introduced today, people really do need to kind of understand. And it's not, we're not trying to like correct people. It's just sometimes, your analogy of you don't know how the sausage is made. No, you don't want to know, but you still have to respect the process.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I think that is the absolute right sentence to use.